Hello everyone! In this video, I'll talk about secret organizations within the Jedi Order. If you like what I do, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can also support the channel on Patreon. It really helps the channel grow. First, let's take a look at the groups of Force users who are sometimes mistakenly referred to as secret Jedi organizations. The first of these are the Wardens of the Sky. The Wardens of the Sky were not a secret Jedi organization. They weren't Jedi at all. The Wardens were a group of independent Force users with their own goals, motives, and methods of using the Force. They were a kind of Robin Hoods of a galaxy far, far away. Except that instead of Sherwood Forest, their sphere of interest was the entire galaxy. Their goal was to protect everyone who traveled through the vastness of the universe from pirates, criminals, cruel rulers, and other such troubles. The Wardens of the Sky could occasionally be found in spaceports and cantinas, from the worlds of the core to the systems of the unknown regions, where they silently and unobtrusively accompanied defenseless travelers. The Wardens of the Sky believed that every person had the right to safe and free travel among the stars. The Wardens never drew attention to themselves, and because of this, they were always like a myth that starship pilots retold to each other in the company of fellow travelers. Similarly, over the long history of the Jedi Order, many different ideological branches and even full-fledged sects formed, such as the Grey Paladin. But they were not secret organizations, as there was no point in hiding from their fellow members of the Order. And they certainly did not resemble the branches of religious and military religious organizations from the real world. There were also groups of Jedi who were simply expelled from the Order for their views, which differed radically from the worldview of the Orthodox members of the Order. Sometimes they left on their own, harboring resentment in their hearts, and then pursued their own methods of learning the Force. Examples of such former members of the Order include Jensara and Potentium. They cannot be considered secret Jedi organizations either, as sometime after leaving the Order, they no longer considered themselves Jedi. Only two organizations within the Jedi Order throughout its known history can be considered secret. These were the Jedi Shadow and the Jedi Covenant. Let's start with the latter. The Covenant was a relatively small group of fanatical Jedi who had one goal: to prevent the return of the dark side in general and the Sith in particular. The Covenant was created shortly after the end of the Great Sith War by Crinda Dry. The Dry family was one of the most powerful and wealthy noble families in the central regions. Most of the Drys were sensitive to the Force, which was due to the careful selection of marriage partners. Many members of this family were great Force users and respected Jedi. This family also produced true prophets, one of whom was the founder of the Covenant. Organizationally, the Covenant was divided into several semi-autonomous cells. There were also lone operatives who were exact copies of the Jedi Shadow who did similar work in the Jedi Order. They were even called the same thing. The Shadows of the Covenant were Jedi whose existence was unknown to the Order's council, or members of the Order whose data had been deleted from the Order's database. One of the Shadows of the Covenant was Celesta Morn. The Covenant's headquarters was the luxurious Dre Palace on Coruscant. Crinda Dre personally selected members for her secret organization. At first, it looked like a hobby club. She personally participated in their training. Some members of the organization who were sensitive to the Force were trained in secret, and the Order Council knew nothing of their existence. Incidentally, the Order's leadership, until the time came, had no idea about the existence of the Covenant itself. This may raise the question, why did these Jedi need to hide from the rest of the Order when all the other Jedi were also engaged in eradicating the dark side of the Force? The reason lay in the methods and means used by the Covenant to combat the Dark Heresy. It also lay in these Jedi's fanatical hatred of everything associated with the dark side of the Force, from its followers to various Sith artifacts. The ruthless destruction of the dark side's followers by the rage-filled light fanatics put the Covenant on the brink of turning to the dark side of the Force. As we know, aggression was not welcomed in the Jedi Order. Remember what Yoda said in first episode of the saga? Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. However, the Covenant did not destroy some Sith artifacts, instead storing them in a secret repository and studying them. The Covenant's methods of combating the approach of the dark side sometimes crossed all conceivable boundaries of cruelty, ignoring the standards of the Jedi Order. For example, Lucian Dre and members of his cell ruthlessly dealt with their own Padawans. The event took place in the Order's enclave on Taris. The reason for the massacre was an unclear vision from which Lucian concluded that one of their Padawans would become a powerful Sith in the future. To be on the safe side, they decided to kill everyone. And in other cases, the Jedi of the Covenant acted in a similar manner. First, exterminate everyone, then figure out who was needed and who was not, or maybe not figure it out at all. Only Zane Carrick survived the massacre orchestrated by Lucien and his associates. In his usual manner, the young Padawan was late for a meeting with his teachers. When the Covenant, in the opinion of the Council, which had learned about this organization, began to fight too zealously against the dark side and common sense, it was decided to destroy the organization. A small Jedi conflict on Coruscant led to the almost complete destruction of the Covenant. The remnants of the organization no longer posed any danger. The goals and methods of this group of fanatics are well described and illustrated in the Knights of the Old Republic comic book series. Let's move on. An equally secret organization within the Jedi Order, known only to the Council and a select few, was the Jedi Shadow. Ironically, the Shadows had the same goals as the Covenant. However, their methods of dealing with heretics were less brutal. At this point, it is unknown when exactly and which Grand Master of the Jedi Order came up with the idea of creating a group of secret lone operatives to destroy and collect anything that looked even remotely Sith-like. All that is known is that for some time, the Shadows were part of the so-called Council of First Knowledge. The first known operations of the Jedi Shadow took place after the end of the Great Hyperspace War in 5000 BBY. After the victorious conclusion of the war, the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order carried out a veritable genocide on the planets of the former Sith Empire for all things good and against all things bad. Republic soldiers and Jedi mercilessly killed not only members of the Sith Order, but also mere mortals, Sith and humans who were not considered sensitive to the Force. Many tombs, temples, palaces, and other shrines of the Sith Order were destroyed, as well as countless creations of Sith alchemy, science, and the Force. But the Jedi understood perfectly well that the genocide did not completely destroy all Sith artifacts and all followers of the dark side of the Force. In order not to cause public outrage and misinterpretation within the Order itself, the Council secretly created a group of Jedi whose hatred for the dark side allowed them to do what other members of the Order, in their pompous holiness, did not allow themselves to do. These Jedi were called Shadows not only because of the secrecy within the Order, but also because they had to act without drawing attention to themselves. The latter circumstance led to the creation of a special training program for the Shadows, which focused on developing stealth skills using the Force. These included invisibility, distraction, brainwashing, and so on. Operational and investigative skills were mandatory for the Jedi Shadow. Until the Great Sith War and the appearance of such figures as Exar Kun, Freeden Nad, Amin, Aminoa, Satal, and Alima Keto in the history of the galaxy, the activities of the Jedi Shadow were considered effective. Dark side cults were discovered from time to time and eliminated quietly and without attracting unnecessary attention. Sith artifacts and literature devoted to the dark side were destroyed. Some of the Sith artifacts collected by the Shadows were kept in the Great Jedi Library on the planet Ossus, where they were studied by great masters who had the appropriate level of access. Incidentally, at the time, it was precisely the fact that Exar Kun was denied access to these secrets that became one of the reasons for this curious Jedi's transition to the dark side of the Force. Only shortly before the start of the Great Sith War did the Order's leadership finally realize the obvious. The Shadows had failed in their work. They had not even noticed the obvious Sith royal dynasty of Onderon right under the Republic's nose, or the revival of the Sith Empire in the unexplored regions of the galaxy. However, there were also notable successes in the history of the Jedi Shadow. One of the large-scale operations of that time nearly resulted in the destruction of the entire numerous Macrossa Order. In 4000 BBY, the head of the Macrossa Order was the powerful Lady Breswalt III of the House Massetti. Like her legendary predecessor, she was a very strong Force user. In addition, she was a master of the lightsaber and an expert marksman with pistols. Incidentally, lightsabers were the traditional weapon of the Tepanian aristocracy, a kind of status symbol and sign of social standing. Therefore, Lady Breswalt's possession of such an exotic weapon did not arouse anyone's suspicion. On top of all this, Breswalt III was an excellent expert on poisons, including particularly deadly Sith poisons, and possessing the Sith talisman made this woman an incredibly dangerous opponent. When the Great Sith War broke out, Lady Breswalt saw it as an opportunity to successfully wage war against the enemies of her home and capture half of the Tapani sector. Breswalt knew that the Republic would simply not have time to be distracted by the insignificant internal affairs of some sector. In this situation, Lady Breswalt could well count on the creation of the Massetti Empire in the sector. Shortly after the declaration of war, the troops of the House Massetti and its allies went on the offensive, and the assassins of Macrosa began their dark work, eliminating the leaders of other ruling houses. The assassins of the Order, armed with the dark side of the Force, lightsabers and poisons, paid particular attention to their main enemy, the House Pelagia. After the elimination of the Pelagians, the Republic would have no influence left in the sector. At the same time, a wave of murders of the highest aristocracy swept through the 4 other houses of the sector: Rena, Melissus, Calypsa, and Barong. The poisoners acted quickly and cleanly. Sometime later, all the territories of the noble houses of Melissus, Calypsa, and Barong became provinces of Massetti. The House Rena also lost a significant amount of territory. However, the House Pelagia, which had probably been expecting such an attack, managed to survive. The Pelagia aristocrats, together with the House Melantha, asked for the protection of the Republic. But the Galactic Republic, bogged down in war with Exar Kun, as Breswalt had expected, ignored the request, having neither the desire nor the ability to respond to the cry for help from its loyal ally. However, there were flaws in Breswalt's plan. First, she overestimated Exar Kun's capabilities, probably assuming that he could, if not defeat the Republic, then at least tie it up in war for many years. Second, she did not take into account the Jedi Shadow, whose existence she probably did not even suspect. Loyal to House Pelagia, the Shadows infiltrated House Massetti in 3997 BBY and lay in wait for the right moment. That moment came after the inconclusive deaths of Exar Kun, as well as Saddle and Alima Keto, who ruled the Krath Empire in 3996 BBY. The Jedi emerged from the shadows, and now the House of Massetti felt the full danger posed by the secret assassins with the gift of the Force. At the same time, troops of Jedi Knights, who had recently fought against the dark minions of Exar Kun, invaded the sector. The war in the Tapani sector, later known as the Cleansing of the Nine Houses, lasted another 3 years and resulted in heavy losses on both sides. The ruler of the House Massetti realized that if the war continued, his noble house could come to an end. Wanting to save his family, he blamed Lady Breswalt for all the events. This betrayal allowed the Massetti nobles not only to save face, but also to preserve their possessions. Breswalt's days were numbered anyway, and by depriving the leader of the Order of material support, the head of the Massetti family had little to lose. He also rightly believed that the Jedi, having finally gained the opportunity to destroy the heretics, would stop there. Fortunately for the Massetti, the Jedi did not care about local politics. They were only interested in the Sith. In the following millennia, the Jedi Shadow continued their usual activities without making too much noise. Their struggle against the Sith during the Great Galactic War was particularly notable, when the Jedi Shadow temporarily ceased to be secret and their existence was known not only to the Council, but also to the ordinary members of the Order. After the Sith Empire was destroyed, the Jedi Shadow once again became a secret organization. The last mention of the Jedi Shadow dates back to the final years of the Jedi Order. Since the Shadows constantly dealt with heretics and their creations, it sometimes happened that the Shadows themselves went over to the side of those they were supposed to fight. The most famous example is a character named Maw. After the end of the Clone Wars, he defected to the Empire, becoming one of many Dark Force users in the service of Emperor Sheev Palpatine. This is my short story about one of the secret aspects of the Jedi Order. Despite their efforts to follow the precepts of the light side of the Force, it often happened that the Jedi came very close to the dark side. It is not surprising that some of them succumbed to the temptation to switch sides. After all, nothing is simply evil or good. I won't raise such philosophical questions here, so I'll just say a big thank you to everyone who watched this video, liked it, left a comment, and subscribed to the channel. Don't forget that you can support the channel on Patreon. You'll find the link in the description. See you in new videos, and bye for now.